Good morning, good afternoon, and good evening for another very special edition of WOWSA Live with a very special guest from South Africa and our host, Ned Dennison. Ned?
Hello, everyone. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have a special guest with us, Cameron Bellamy, who was the first honor swimmer from Africa, not from Egypt. So we opened up an entire continent with his induction. Cameron, go ahead and say hello to everyone.
Hi, everybody, and hi to Steve and Ned. Thanks for having me on.
Cameron, I'd like to talk about your early endurance events. You're kind of unique that you snuck into swimming on the back of a few other events. So I'm just going to read some of this stuff. You rode 6,620 kilometers in 2014 on a 6-person team, setting 2 Guinness records as the longest and fastest across the Indian Ocean from Australia to Africa. 3 long cycling adventures, the longest 6,000 kilometers solo and unassisted from Beijing to India along the Silk Road and down to the southern tip of India in 4 months. So, Cameron, you got to tell us, what was possibly driving you to do these early endurance events?
It's kind of weird, but I obviously, most people know me as a swimmer these days, but I never grew up a swimmer. I think my last actual formal swim race was when I think it was 10 years old. I was at a inter-house school gala when I did the underwater race. And I wasn't even selected to do like freestyle or anything, just the underwater race. I actually won that underwater race. That was my last official pool swim race. So actually I grew up rowing, and my whole school, childhood, university career I was rowing, and I took it really seriously, obviously, and it kind of culminated in me rowing for South Africa at under 23 level in 2003, 2004. And that was obviously the pinnacle of my life to that point. But then eventually kind of fell away from rowing when I left university and started working. And I guess like these things that I did, the cycling and the rowing things, they were just the kind of way to get back into endurance sports. And I think I realized in my late 20s that I was actually pretty good at the really, really long stuff, like the long cycles and rows. And then I chose swimming because I set up this charity, the Abunya Challenge, and I was setting myself some goals to raise money for early childhood development in South Africa. Through like doing some endurance events, and swimming the English Channel was one of those goals, even though I'd never swum before.
And where were you located when this swimming bug hit you?
I just moved to London, and so I just done this crazy cycling trip, as you mentioned. When I lived in China for 3 years, and I bought a bicycle and cycled to India. Then luckily got my job back, the same company, but in London, because kind of ran out of money after that long cycling trip. And I called my boss and asked for my job back. And he said, nothing going in Beijing or New York, but you would have got a position in London if you want it. So that's where I ended up in London. And this is when I started the charity after doing that crazy cycling trip and being by myself for so long. I kind of realized what I actually wanted to do. And so when I arrived in London, I set up the charity, and then I had to think of some crazy things to do to raise money. And so I was in London at the time, and one of the goals was to cycle the length of the United Kingdom. The other was to swim the English Channel, and the next goal was to row across an ocean.
And when you were in London, did you connect with the Serpentine Club? Were you down to Dover for the training weekend? What was your connection like there to the sport?
Yeah, all of it. I went in pretty deep, and as you can do in the UK, it's so awesome. Open water swimming. There are so many passionate people. So I joined the Serpentine at Hyde Park, and that was just amazing. It's just swimming with so many people who have just a good advice, and previous channel swimmers, and getting used to the cold water in Hyde Park over the winter, and then obviously went down and joined Mrs. Streeter down at Dover Harbor for those weekend swims, which is pretty eye-opening. I remember the one time, obviously I wasn't a very good swimmer, but I definitely wasn't a good cold water swimmer. and it was early in the season. The water was still about 12 and a half degrees. This is probably this is going to be my first long swim. She tells us to swim for 5 hours and in 12 degrees. And I was like, there's no way, it's impossible. And she told me, look, if you can't do 5 hours, do 4 hours, but I want you to try and do 5. And I was like, well, I'm going to do 4, Anyway, so I do like 4 hours and I'm freezing. And then I try to come out the water at 4 hours. And like Frida's there, and she's like, no, get back out again. And I was like, no, but you said I can get after 4. But I'm so cold that like I can't really get the words out. And eventually I was like, I'm not going to argue with her anymore. I'm just going to go do another, like some semicircles, And she said, come on, just do half an hour more. But at half an hour more, come out. And she's not there anymore. Someone else is there. And they pushed me out again. So half an hour, I came back so cold. I think I pretty much passed out in the car on the way home. But yeah, it was my first experience with Mrs. Streeter.
Well, Cameron, I wear these headphones not to get a better quality, but Frida once got a hold of my right ear when I was in a car and tried to pull me through the small gap in the window. So I keep the ear pinned down. We are trying to get Frida to do an interview. So Frida, if you're listening, we have you in our sights. It's not just going to be a half an hour, Frida. We're going to keep you for 6 hours talking about your life. Cameron, tell us about the charity. Tell us first of all what the cause is, and give us some idea of the total amount of money that's been raised.
Yeah, sure. Yeah. So as I mentioned, I came up with the kind of idea when I was cycling from Beijing to India. Obviously, I'd grown up quite privileged in South Africa. Had the opportunity to go to really nice schools. In South Africa, it's very evident on a daily basis that if you are privileged, it's quite it's significant. You can see it. And kind of grew up kind of realizing that I kind of won the lottery of birth. I've had great opportunities, and which had led me up until that point. And so that cycling trip across Asia was very introspective for me. And I guess that's where the wheels of the charity started to turn. When I eventually arrived in London, I was working in a skyrise in Canary Wharf, one of the financial districts in London. So a little bit disillusioned with that current setup, as you can imagine, after being on a bike for 4 months. I started speaking to a few friends and colleagues, and we decided to set up this charity. And for me, it was always going to be about education. And so, but I wasn't exactly sure what, because obviously you can't just like set up a charity and say, I'm just going to raise money. We wanted to find a specific cause that we could assist with. And so we spoke to a number of people on the ground and in London. And we eventually learned that in this area, in the Eastern Cape, very poor area, which is quite close to where I went to university, there was no formal early childhood development classes taking place in about 100-kilometer radius. So kids are going to the first day of school at age 5 or 6. And, those years where their mind are developing the fastest and the most, between the age of like 6 months and 4 years, like these kids are sitting at home and doing nothing. And so essentially they really have no chance at life, even before they can really think for themselves. And so that was obviously a very tangible cause we kind of lashed onto, and we started raising money for. And it's just kind of gone from there. From back then there were 0 classes taking place, or 0 centers offering early childhood development. Now we have our partners now, we've helped have about 16 centers, 9 of which are funded by the government. And so it's a great model we have. We set up the schools, we get the parents registered as teachers, and once the parents are registered as teachers, as practitioners, we then apply to the government to start funding the school. And so it's a great sustainable model that our partners have used there. And we also work in Zimbabwe, where the issue there is more infrastructure because of the economic situation in the country. A lot of schools don't have the funding anymore for infrastructure. So we just help with infrastructure projects at existing schools to deal with overpopulation at those schools, like building classroom blocks. And also at the moment, we have a massive project. It's a 2 or 3 year project where we're building the first A-level school in an area called Concession, where kids are currently walking about 4 hours to and from the nearest A-level school every day. And it's not obviously just me. We have 15 board members who help and who do a lot of the work. And so it's great. We're all scattered around the world, but we all have this one one mission, which is making sure the kids in Southern Africa have access to education.
I was curious about this experience you had working in London, missing the cycling. So was it the temperature controlled rooms? Was it the soft bed? Was it the cushy chair? Was it the ready availability of toilet paper? The fabulous dating scene in London? What was it about the cycling that you missed so much sitting in London at that time?
I think if you've been to Canary Wharf in London, it's an amazing place. It's just, I think it generates so much money for the United Kingdom, and London as a city. It's pretty sterile, and it's just high buildings and glass and cement, and it just felt very artificial, as opposed to being like under the blue sky in the Kazakhstan steppe, every day, just cycling, being fresh air. Such a huge difference. And I like both. I love my job. I love what I do for work. I love my career, but I also love like the outdoors, and I guess I'm quite lucky that I've been able to balance the two quite well.
So you're in London, you set your goal to do the English Channel, you do the English Channel. How did you morph from the English Channel to the Ocean Sevens?
Yeah, so I mean, the initial goal of the Open Challenge on the athletic side was to cycle the UK, as I mentioned, then swim the Channel, then row across the Atlantic Ocean. All supposed to happen within 1 year. And the first two did. They happened in 2012, but the Atlantic row, there was 6 of us trying to row the Atlantic, and we had funding issues. As you can imagine, we were just a bunch of kids trying to raise money to do this row, and we were all paying for it ourselves, essentially, yeah, because all the money we raise for charity goes directly to the projects. None of that comes to us. So everything goes straight to projects. And so we're raising the money through corporate sponsorship or ourselves, and it just never materialized. Even though we had the boat ready, we had everything ready. And so we didn't go that route. And I eventually signed up to row the Indian Ocean like a year later. And that Indian Ocean row, which you mentioned, I had to take 4 months off work, and so I took a sabbatical really. And it's not ideal. I love the ocean rowing thing. It's so awesome. I love being on a boat that long and with awesome friends, but it's not conducive to a career. You can't keep doing that. Whereas with swimming, like I got back from that ocean row in 2014. I loved the whole experience, but I was like, man, I can't do that again. But swimming the English Channel, I love this. I love the training. I can do that when I'm working. And then for the English Channel, you can take off a day of work and go to the English Channel. Could even be back at work the next day, kind of thing. If you do it on the weekend, you might not even miss any work. So the whole swimming scene just kind of made a lot of sense. Just to be able to manage my career, and as I said, I love the training. I love executing the swim in light of how difficult it is. I love the challenge of ocean open water swimming. In some ways, and I've said this a few times, it's like, for example, the North Channel swim was the hardest thing I've ever done. And I would even compare it, maybe it's even harder to be successful on a North Channel swim than it is to row across an ocean.
What was the moment when that Ocean Sevens crystallized in your head, and why not the Triple Crown, which is 3 instead of 7? What was the moment? Did you remember, or did it just sneak up on you somehow?
Yes, I didn't answer your question. I think I read about the Ocean 7, and obviously already done one of them, and I knew about the Triple Crown, but I wasn't that keen on Manhattan. I don't know why. It didn't appeal to me as much. And I think every open water swimmer has swims on their bucket list and swims that they're not really that interested in doing. And Manhattan really wasn't on my list. But I looked at the Ocean 7. I obviously read about it by Steve Manatonis, and it just sounded really cool. Straight to Gibraltar, North Channel, Molokai, all these swims just were such cool places, and were such hard swims. And then opposed to swimming up the Harlem River. I was like, I'll do those ones, But I think I might do Manhattan, just to check it off. But yeah, the Ocean 7 definitely appealed to me.
So for the viewers out there who've done one of the Ocean Sevens, Cameron's viewpoint was, well, you got most of them done already. That's 1 out of 7. You might as well peck off the other 6. You ended up in San Francisco. Tell us how that happened. Don't tell me you lost your job after another rowing and ended up getting another job in San Francisco. There's got to be a story here somewhere, Cameron.
Oh, that's a great story. Yeah, you'll love it. So I went to the Straits of Gibraltar was my next swim after the row. So it's my second of the Ocean 7 swims. And I flew over to Spain. I took my mom with me. So yeah, my father had unfortunately passed away about 6 months before, and my mom had been traveling with my sister, been with my sister quite a bit, then she was back at home. So I told her to come over because she was by herself. So we both went to Tarifa, and it was an awesome experience with my mom being in us being there together, you know, like in Tarifa, which is an awesome place. And but I booked a week with Raphael, the guy who was organizing our swim, and obviously, you know, like Tarifa is like, it's like the kite surfing capital of the world. Like it was so windy for my week. We never got to swim. And I went to Raphael at the end of the week and I was like, hey man, like I know my window's done, but like I can stay here, work remotely. I don't have to go back to London just yet. Can I still swim this week? And he said, well, I've booked the next week with this American guy and girl. But if you talk to them, maybe you can swim with them. So he introduced me to this guy called Steve and a girl called Amy, Steve Walker and Amy Gubza. And I met them for dinner. And then we did a swim in the morning. And I was in between Amy and Steve's speed. Obviously now I'm a lot faster than Steve. But back then I wasn't. Yeah, so we were perfectly matched in terms of speed. So I ended up doing the swim, and like halfway across, we actually had a perfect day. It was flat. The sun was out. We saw whales. You know, it was such an awesome swim. So about 2 hours in, me and Steve were sitting in the middle, drinking some water, and Steve like asked me like, "What do you do for work, Cam?" And I was like, "Oh, I work in London, like finance, like technology stuff." And I was like, "What do you do, Steve?" And he's like, "Oh, I have this like business technology consulting firm in San Francisco." And I'm like, "Oh, cool, that's nice." And then we carried on swimming. I got to Morocco, and me and Amy did like a sprint finish to the end, and she actually beat me at the end. And but then I had to fly straight back to London. So I went, so we pretty much got the boat back. I went to the airport and flew back to London, but then me and Steve like stayed in touch, and like the next like 3-4 months we kept chatting on Skype. And one of the last conversations we had, he said like, "What do you want to do with your career, Cameron?" And I was like, "Steve, I think I want to move away from this corporate deal and be more entrepreneurial, more in technology." And he's like, "All right, done. Come over to San Francisco. I want you to help me with this company. I want to spin off the security side of my company. I want you to help run it." And I don't think he regrets it. You know, I'm still there, and it's gone quite well. And we still be pretty good friends. And you know, he's helped me a lot. He's mentored me on the business side and the swimming side. And as I mentioned, a little bit quicker than him now, unfortunately for him. But yeah, it's tough.
Do you know if Steve paid Raphael a recruitment fee for this?
I don't think so. You should have.
Tell me about the Ocean Sevens, but tell me the best experiences and the most difficult times. You mentioned the North Channel was a big challenge, but give us the best of it and the most difficult of it.
Yeah, I think my favorite was Molokai. It's the only swim which I did, and I felt pretty good afterwards, and I could have done more. Maybe it's because I'm better in warmer water. I'm not sure, but felt great. I did it with Steve, and Steve didn't have the best swim. We had to separate, you know, about 2 hours from the end. But yeah, we saw like a tiger shark during the swim. Like we both saw it and didn't tell each other, didn't tell anybody else. But like it was the most beautiful thing I think I'd ever seen. Like it was so graceful. Just kind of swam 20 meters past us. And at the same time, some dolphins joined us. We had a beautiful day. I got stung by a Portuguese man-o-war, which is pretty tough. It wasn't ideal, obviously, but it was a good learning curve. Getting stung by jellyfish or Portuguese man-o-wars. And so I think that was my favorite. And then, the best moment was finishing the Tsuguru, my last one, because I'd previously failed that one with Steve. So that was really nice getting across. And then obviously the hardest one was the North Channel. As I mentioned, I'm probably not the best cold water swimmer, and me and Andrew McLaughlin, who's another South Ender. We actually attempted it same day as 2016. We were the first swim of that year, and so it was early July, and not ideal. It was cold, as you can imagine, like the first swim of the season. And so we did, obviously I didn't see Andrew Lee. We left half an hour apart. I left half an hour after him, and I think he went to Padraig, and spoke to Padraig afterwards, and he was like, man, the water was like 10.5 to 12 degrees, and it took us 12 hours, and I'm not really sure how I got through that, but I don't remember the last couple of hours. My brother swam with me the last hour, and I don't remember him being there. I've got some pretty scary photos of me afterwards, just being completely just blanked out, and but yeah, got across. And you obviously the stingers, they're quite, well, they're just a lot of them. They're not, the stingers are like mosquito bites, but you get stung by a lot of them, and it sucks. It was the most nervous I'd ever been before a swim, before that one. And I think I was first, after 6 hours, I thought I was not going to make it. I was tired, I was dead, and I wasn't sure how far I'd gone. But I think one of the reasons I made it is I went to Quentin, and I asked him how am I doing at 6 hours? I said, how am I doing? Expecting the worst. And he's like, man, you're way over halfway. You're going to break the record if you keep going at this pace. So I think what happened was I was so cold and so nervous. I just went out really hard, and my speed is good. And so I ended up finishing in 12 hours. But once I'd heard that I was over halfway and doing pretty well, that's when I kind of thought I could just keep going and make it.
And to this day, do you know if Quentin was telling you the truth or lying?
I don't think Quentin lies, I don't think that guy's capable of not telling the lie. He's so straight-laced. And I think he was telling me the truth.
I would have told you that, and I would have been lying.
Yeah, well, that's you.
So congratulations, you do the Ocean Sevens. Time to relax, put your feet up, focus on the career. No need to set yourself any more goals. And then your thoughts turn to the Caribbean and some big swims. What were you thinking, Cameron?
Well, it actually came about before that. Before I finished the Ocean 7, I was trying to train for Molokai, and I had never really swum in warm water before. And so I had a friend who visited me in San Francisco, a guy called Adam from Rhodes University. I was at Rhodes University with him. And he actually lived in Barbados. And so we had dinner in San Francisco, and he said, hey man, if you want to do some warm water training, you should come to visit me. So I went across and I visited him for 5 days, did some amazing swimming, met the community there, which was awesome. And it's like swimming in an aquarium there. So I obviously loved it. And then when I took off from Barbados, flying back, we left from the southeast side of the island, did a U-turn and came back, and had a little picture. I could see the island from above, and I was like, hey man, it's not that big. I think I can swim around it. And I really regretted that decision, because as soon as I got back to San Francisco, I emailed Adam and said I might try to swim around the island, and I found out that it had been tried a couple of times before. No one already even kind of got around the southeast part, which is the most difficult, so not even a quarter of the way around, for various reasons. And so I signed up for that one, and this is before I'd even finished the Ocean 7. And and then so the first time I tried that swim, I didn't make it. I did 27 hours, got 2/3 way around, but even the next day, I kind of knew I could do it, and came back 2 months later, and had the swim of my life, and really cranked it out. And even at the point where I'd kind of gotten out the first time, the northwest part of the island, when I got to that point, I had a few negative thoughts, but I had this amazing crew that helped me the first time and this time. We were 30 people in 6 or 7 boats trying to get me around the island. And at that point, I was looking at my crew, and especially the girl, Christina Evelyn, who's she pretty much organizes my whole life in Barbados when I'm there. She was in the kayak next to me, and I was like, there's no ways I can let these guys down. So I got through that really tough mental part. And then once I was through there, I kind of smashed down the west side of the island and finished in 41 hours. But even then, at 41 hours, I had a great swim, and I was like, man, I could do more. So that's why I kind of wanted to do the Cuba, Florida swim. And that was a mess because it was all fine. We'd organized the boats, crew, and everything. And then in June, before I was going to do it in September, the old Trump administration sent us a letter saying access to Cuba is denied for your support vessel. So we couldn't get our vessel there, and so we had to cancel that 3 weeks before. But luckily, I mean, I'd done all the training, and luckily the people in Barbados are so amazing. I just called up Christina and said, like, hey, I think that Barbados and Lucia swims equally as hard, if not harder than Cuba, Florida. Let's try to do this one. We managed to organize that swim in like 3 weeks, which is insane. For like, I mean, arguably one of the most complicated logistically like swims ever. Like in the middle of the Atlantic, like export licenses, immigration, customs, one boat getting you across. Like no one's ever swum there before. Like it was a crazy swim that we just like let's go and do it. And I mean, organize it in Christina organized it in 3 weeks, and that was one of the coolest things about that swim is that you're looking out from Barbados towards St. Lucia, like you're just looking at open ocean and beautiful ocean water, and that's never been swum before. And that uncertainty of what the hell's out there was amazing. And yeah, I love that swim.
Give us some idea of the differences in teamwork. You talk about the team involved in around Barbados. Compare that to a team to row across the Indian Ocean, or even on your solo cycle from China to the tip of India. I presume somebody was wiring you money every now and then, or sending you spare tires to depots along the way. Tell us about teamwork in the various enterprises and the similarities and the differences.
Yeah, no, I mean, teamwork, it's what makes everything happen. Even going beyond that, to my charities, like we have 15 people involved in my charity, and I work, Steve and all our employees, like, and obviously, like, but the teamwork on an ocean row is obviously it's the most stark. It's because you're in such a stressful environment, and you have to rely on each other. Like for example, the last row that I did from South America to Antarctica, like one of the most daring, complicated, like risky rows in history. No one's ever rowed there before, and we're just 6 guys who like don't know each other that well, trying to get across the Drake Passage, and like it's kind of like it really brought home to me how important like teams are and how well you communicate and interact and help each other. On that row, it's you really have to understand each other really well and be prepared to be vulnerable. We're trying to help each other out. Like for example, there were 3 guys who never rowed before in that crew, especially on a big ocean, and we just had to help each other through. And as you know, and in swimming, like for example, on the Barbados to St. Lucia swim, we had 12 people on the catamaran who were just continually rotating and helping me, getting me through. The toughest time for me was on the second day. The first day was extremely hot. The water was 32 degrees, and the second day went up with 32.5 degree water, which is like, as you know, like it's pretty much as hot as water can get. It's 90 degrees Fahrenheit. It's the most uncomfortable feeling, having to swim, especially a long swim in that water temperature. And I remember from like 10 o'clock onwards, 10 a.m. onwards, I was just getting worse and worse, and I could feel myself getting worse. I could barely like even focus on my kayaker anymore. My sight was blurry and everything. And I remember at about probably 1 or 2 p.m. I went to the catamaran to feed, and Christina Evelyn, she's obviously the one who helped me through my Barbados swim, around Barbados swim. She saw me and she's like Cam doesn't look good. And they started asking me questions, and I was like I wasn't really sensical, I wasn't making sense. And they're like, he's obviously really hot. And they knew I was hot, because I mean, even the Barbadians who usually swim every day in Barbados, they were, instead of swimming an hour with me, they were doing only half an hour, and they were getting out complaining it was too hot. So if they think it's too hot, then it's hot. And anyway, so like from about 2 p.m. to 5 p.m., just to get me through to sunset, like they were just feeding me instead of every half an hour, they're feeding me every 15 minutes, and just getting this. ice in my water bottles, and I was putting the ice in my caps, my Speedo, like just to cool down. And we took it really slow, but they really, coached me through that period. And as soon as the sun went down, I was back on it, and kind of really cranked out the rest of that swim. But if it wasn't for that support creed, like there's no ways I would have been able to carry on in those in that hot water.
So you've now done your last big swim. You've now done your last big rowing. No more cycling. Picking up mahjong or checkers or chess or something. So what is next for you? Or dare I ask?
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I'm in awe of Sarah Thomas and like what she's done, and especially like the long swims. Obviously, I've done a couple of long swims now, but I would love to be able to kind of do a similar kind of freshwater swim that she's done. And I feel like I'm not I can't really imagine myself doing a back and forth, and I'd love to just do a straight lake swim. And when I was doing my original cycling trip from Beijing to India, I cycled past this amazing lake called Issyk Kul, which means warm lake in the Kyrgyzstan local language. It's in Kyrgyzstan. It's the most beautiful lake I've ever seen. It's fed by glaciers. It doesn't flow anywhere. Just like it goes out through springs. And it's called warm lake, but it's actually not that warm. I think it maxes at about 21 degrees. It's like 69 degrees, maybe a bit less Fahrenheit. And and it's the most beautiful. It's in the middle of the Tian Shan mountain range, and I've seen it. Back then I couldn't even swim. When I cycled past it, didn't even think I was going to go back there and swim it. But now I might be. I'm trying to organize that for next year, August. I was hoping to try it this year, but obviously with COVID and not being able to train and the logistics, it's not going to happen. But yeah, I think that's going to be my next big swim. And because I have a while now, over a year to train for that one, I'm going to do some cool swims. I think in the meantime, like one in Cape Town, around the peninsula, maybe potentially one in the Eastern Cape of South Africa, like Port Elizabeth, East London area. That's where I do all my charity stuff, and potentially one in Australia too. So I think the next year is going to be quite exciting.
Cameron Bellamy, we congratulate you on your career in progress. We're welcoming you to the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, and we look forward to following your exploits. Thank you very much, sir.
Thanks, Ned. Thanks for having me on. It's an honor.